This morning we're continuing our St. Joe's History series, and we're focusing today on the Refugee Outreach Committee. I'm here today with Terry Byrne and Louise Lalonde to talk a little bit about the history of the committee's work. Terry, to start with you, historically, what role has St. Joe's played in dealing with refugees who've come to Ottawa?
Well, Chris, as you may recall, there was three major influxes of refugees over the last 70 years. The first one was as a result of the Hungarian Revolution in 1956. And at that time, Canada accepted 37,000 refugees. Now, there's no records to indicate what our parish was involved in at that time, what extent. But I did find one photo indicating that a garage that was filled with furniture was for the refugees from Hungary. And that's the only record we have as a parish about the Hungarian Revolution and how we supported people from Hungary. However, we would have had the St. Vincent de Paul Society very actively involved if we had any refugees from Hungary in our parish. And they would have provided food, clothing, and any support needed. The second major influx dealt with after the result of the Vietnam War. And between 1975 and 1990, we brought in over 200,000 Indo-Chinese. And once again, our records were not that great. And the only record I have of our involvement there was a letter from a parishioner to Father Fred McGee, in which he states we should be sponsoring one of these families. Because you may recall back then that Marion Dewar had Project 4000, in which she said we should be sponsoring 4,000 Indo-Chinese in the city of Ottawa alone. But I have no record as to whether or not we did anything. And the final major refugee influx occurred as a result of the Syrian civil war in 2016. And up to 2020, we had over 54,000 refugees come into the country. Now, I'm not going to speak about that because Louise will touch maybe a bit about that and what the parish has been involved in earlier on. But in general terms, every year we have refugees coming into this country in great numbers. And so it's not just a major humanitarian crisis. We've had them coming in from South America, from Africa, all as a result of people looking for a better place and a better home and safer home to live in. So I'll pass it on to Louise, who will give us a more current time frame as to what's been happening with the refugees in our parish.
Okay, so we'll turn to you, Louise. Now, Louise, what motivated you to commit to working with newcomers to Canada?
Before I answer that question, I would like to respond to what Gary has said. I was asked to speak about the early days of the Refugee Committee, so I will not be speaking about the Syrian influx. So the questions that will be asked of me are for the first 2 years. That's 1990 to 1992. Okay.
Yeah, so initially you began working with newcomers in Canada. What was the main motivating factor for you to work with them?
My life was a whole series of fresh starts. By the time I was 44, I had never lived in one place for more than 4 years. Then I moved to Ottawa and have been stable ever since, which was a new experience. I think the main factor was I spent 3 years in Portugal, and I had never been outside the country except for the States. So it was a very enriching experience, very mind-broadening, but at the same time it was a lonely experience. And I promised myself that when I would come back to Canada, that experience would serve to help other people who could feel isolated. And I would either be teaching ESL, not ESL, I would be teaching illiterate people to read because I had been a teacher, or else I would work with newcomers. And the opportunity arose when there was an announcement in St. Joe's Parish Bulletin saying that the Catholic Immigration Center was setting up a temporary host program. I signed up for that, and I hosted a family for 1 year. And from day one, when I signed up for that project, I was named on the board of directors of Catholic Immigration Center, and worked with the center from that point on. And it's out of that the Refugee Committee came to be.
So you speak a little bit about how the ROC here came to be in the early years. How would you describe that period? What were the sort of the first activities that you would see in the ROC when it initially was started at St. Joe's?
Basically, John Paul II had written a Lenten letter that he sent throughout the world called "The Whole World a Common Home," inviting all the Christian communities throughout the world to reach out to refugees. That was 1990. That same year, Archbishop Marcel Gervais was named Archbishop of Ottawa. He was very concerned about the plight of church workers in El Salvador that were being killed. And so he wanted to do something. He asked the Catholic Immigration Center to organize a symposium for the whole archdiocese. At that symposium, he asked all the parishes to stand up a refugee committee, and not all the parishes would have equivalent participation, but they could host, they could sponsor, they could provide time, they could help fundraise. So according to whatever their capacity was, they were invited to participate. And 31 parishes did sign up. From St. Joe's, we were 3 parishioners at that symposium. Afterwards, we met with the parish priest, Jerry Morris, and with Terry's brother, Gary Byrne, to present the project for a refugee committee. It was accepted. And so that's how it began.
Now, what were some of the first major projects of the ROC as it began?
The committee started up in, we met with Father Jerry in June, and we waited till the fall to recruit at the Marketplace for Possibilities. We got 22 people, and in October, the Marketplace was in October. In December, we named chair and secretary-treasurer, and at that point, the committee was barely born. Catholic Immigration Center contacted us and said, "We have this young man from Eritrea who is in Italy right now." Well, he was in Italy, and he was sent to Canada as his country of adoption, and 3 parishes in Ottawa had accepted to sponsor him. And what happened in his case that never ever happened in history was that he came 6 months early. Refugees come late, they never come early. He was 6 months early. The parishes said, "We're not prepared, we haven't fundraised," so they backed out. So we were asked to take on to sponsor this young man. The committee was barely born. We went to see Gary and talked with him. He lent us $3,000 because the Catholic Immigration Center had spent $2,000 on him already, and we had to refund that. So we borrowed $3,000, refunded the $2,000, and then we had $1,000 to support him. At that point, anyone taking ESL was given an amount of money equivalent to welfare to live on. So this young man, his name was Gide, he was getting welfare while he was taking ESL, and so that relieved our responsibility. And then in March, 3 months later, he got a part-time job doing house cleaning, doing office cleaning, and so he became independent. And then there was a young Palestinian who was a parishioner. Well, actually, he joined RCIA, he became Catholic, he was baptized here, and he needed help with lawyer fees. So that was another project. And another was hosting. In a very few months, we were hosting families from El Salvador, Nicaragua, Bangladesh, and Ethiopia. So members of our committee were twinned with these families. You support them for 1 year. There's no financial responsibility, but you are responsible for supporting them and helping to integrate for 1 year's time.
Okay, so this was an exciting period in history for sure. Would you have any anecdotes that you could share with us from your time working with the Refugee Outreach Committee?
Yes. There's one. We had support a Kosovar family, And the X in Ottawa was opening up at Lansdowne Park. And the day before opening, when they were testing the rides, people who could not afford to pay to attend the X were allowed to come. You had to have tickets. You were given tickets. You would go. The rides would be free. The pizza would be free. The drinks would be free. So we were given tickets for 5 children, 4 from one family and 1 from a family across the street. And so we brought these children. They had a very exciting time. At 10 o'clock at night, there was an announcement saying that the rides are closing. This is our last chance, your last chance to get on the rides. So we dashed to the Ferris wheel. 2 boys got on. Sammy and Agron got on first, and the Ferris wheel turned up a quarter of the way, so they were up there. Then I got on with 3 little girls. The Ferris wheel went to the top with the 2 boys, and I with the 2 girls in the middle, and I was terrified. And I thought, those boys up there, how were they faring? When the ride was over, I asked Sammy, how was that? He said, oh, Louise, I was so scared. I prayed to God, if I come down, I will never get on the ride again. And then there's an announcement saying that the Russian waterfall is opening for the last time, is offering a ride for the last time, and then it's closing. Samuel was on it. And in the days that followed, we asked the children to make drawings to give to the gentleman who had given us the tickets. He didn't know us, we didn't know them, but they made these drawings and gave them to him. And I kept a mini copy of each. And so we're going to show you those. So the first one down here is the haunted house. Mm-hmm. The next one is the Ferris wheel, and you can see the 2 boys up there, and you can see me with 3 girls in the middle. And at the top here is the Russian water slide.
Great, thank you. Okay. Now I think you also mentioned to me before we filmed that you may have one more anecdote, perhaps?
Yes. There were 2 families who lived in the same apartment building that I had been bringing to church. I would bring the family of 5 to 9:30 Mass, and then I would bring a couple at 11:30 Mass, because I couldn't take everybody in the car at the same time. The young couple, her name was Anatoly, was pregnant. So I had told her, when it's time to go to the hospital, call and I will take you. And on a Friday, she goes to the hospital. She goes to an appointment with her doctor, with another volunteer that I had been working with this family. And the doctor told her the baby is positioned for delivery, so the delivery will be very fast. Nobody told me that. And the volunteer took the plane that day for Vancouver for a holiday. She didn't tell me. And so Saturday, the following day, I'm on a stepladder with an electric drill, setting up my Venetian blinds. And Samuel calls and says, Louise, come. Okay, I clean up, change clothes, drive over there. The ambulance is already there. I dash up to their apartment. The door is wide open, there's nobody home. So I go down to the apartment of the family of 5. And Angelo, the father of the family, says, well, by that time, the Anatoly was on the gurney with her baby, and the bathroom was an absolute mess, and the medics took her away. So I asked the family what happened here, and so Angelo said, Anatoly came down, she needed help. So I told my wife, do for her what African women do for each other. So they put her in the bathtub. She had her baby in the bathtub. And so I thought it was very wise when I offered to take her to the hospital. But I learned that 911 is a much better option. So there you go.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that story. Gives a bit of an idea of the life of the ROC and how you've reached out. Thanks to both of you, Louise and Terry, for sharing a little bit about the work and the history of the Refugee Outreach Committee at St. Joe's.